The other day, I came across this post on Threads. You know, your typical engagement bait, but hey, it worked. I answered, yeah, every single day. It's part of the job. I moved on, but for some reason I couldn't let go of this, be completely honest, as if refactoring were like eating your veggies. So I went back to check out the other answers and I was like, okay, maybe we need to talk about this. There was, for example, this innocent question. The reactions made it seem like it was a joke, you know? I rename variables all the time, so I refactor regularly, right folks? Or maybe they were supposed to mean, oh no, silly, changing a variable name is not refactoring. I'm not completely sure, but to answer the question, let's consider the book. Which book, you ask? The book. Or its younger sibling, the second edition, with a slightly updated catalog and JavaScript code examples. And yes, I do own both versions because I'm nerdy like that. And also yes, renaming a variable actually is a refactoring. But regardless of whether this was a beginner question or a joke, there is a common misconception that refactoring is just a term for rewriting code, which explains statements like, if it works, don't touch it. Well, let me read a little bit from the book. The term refactoring can be used either as a noun or a verb. Refactoring, noun. A change made to the internal structure of software to make it easier to understand and cheaper to modify without changing its observable behavior. Refactoring, verb. To restructure software by applying a series of refactorings without changing its observable behavior. Refactoring is all about applying small behavior-preserving steps and making a big change by stringing together a sequence of these behavior-preserving steps. Each individual refactoring is either pretty small itself or a combination of small steps. As a result, when I'm refactoring, my code doesn't spend much time in a broken state, allowing me to stop at any moment even if I haven't finished. Refactoring may seem inefficient to people who first come across it and watch me making lots of tiny steps when a single bigger step would do. But the tiny steps allow me to go faster because they compose so well and, crucially, because I don't spend any time debugging. This is really important. A single refactoring is a small, controlled, and safe operation that won't break anything if performed correctly. This book gives you step-by-step instructions to do it safely, and it was good to have them back then in 1999 because, as far as I know, the Smalltalk refactoring browser was the only tool for automated refactorings at that time. These days, most IDEs let you perform many of them. You don't even have to worry about the exact mechanics anymore. Just select a piece of code and click rename variable, pull up method, extract interface, inline function, etc. Does this fact make the book obsolete? I don't think so. There are still refactorings that IDEs can't or at least don't handle, plus the descriptions and especially the examples make it worth it. I find it so much easier to learn something when someone breaks down their thought process, and Martin does this really well. I've included links to the books in the description, but you don't have to be crazy like me and get both versions. The point I want to make is that you can do many refactorings safely today because your IDE will do it for you. Does that mean there's zero chance of breaking something? No, but if you take small steps, spotting issues should be pretty easy. However, if you don't touch code in general because you're afraid of breaking something, that's a different problem. And the root of it is usually that your test coverage is too low or maybe even non-existent. And all I can say is fix that problem and refactoring won't feel scary anymore. Quite the opposite. And I can't really argue with that because it does indeed make me feel good. I also agree that it doesn't always add direct value to the final product, at least not in terms of customer value. But this is a little short-sighted, isn't it? Focusing only on customer value and neglecting code quality and maintainability will cause bigger problems down the road. Why? Because even small issues can snowball into bigger ones over time. Fighting technical debt is a constant battle, and when people say things like, you don't get paid for refactoring, you get paid for bug fixes and updates, I can't help but think, this is You get paid to develop software, and developing software properly includes basic hygiene tasks like refactoring, writing tests, and keeping the code maintainable. If someone tells you otherwise, they are wrong, and I will die on that hill. Having said that, the world is not black and white. And that's why statements like this are also worrisome. Living in extremes is rarely good. banishing refactoring from your workflow is bad, and so is overdoing it. Interestingly, the outcome is similar. It slows down the development process, just in a different way. It doesn't matter that your gold-plated solution is better in theory. It's not worth much if you don't make progress. The implication of what I've said in the past 5 minutes or so is do it, but also don't overdo it. And I get it, this is frustrating advice. It would be so much easier if there were hard and fast rules, but unfortunately, there are not. Welcome to the world of software development, where everyone thinks it's all about writing code. In reality, a lot of it comes down to making good decisions. But how do you make those decisions? Here's what works for me. When writing new code, I always refactor to get the best possible version. The reason is simple. Code deteriorates anyway, but we don't have to give it a head start. And just for clarification, with the best possible version, I mean the best possible version you need right now. Don't go overboard and try to anticipate hypothetical future use cases. When making changes to existing code or when deciding to refactor related code, it gets trickier. The key is to find some kind of balance. If it's a change that takes, let's say, 20 minutes, it's hard to justify spending 2 hours on refactoring, especially if we're in the nice-to-have territory and the code is just a little untidy. I mean, if it's really going to take 2 hours, there's probably a lot of untidiness, but let's assume it's more about sheer volume, not complexity. Remember, you don't have to go all the way from untidy to super shiny. Refactorings are small. You can probably do a few in 20 minutes. So 20 minutes of changes, 20 minutes of refactoring, 50-50 sounds fair to me. But maybe it's one of those sneaky changes that look like it should only take 5 minutes. You dive into the code base and realize someone did in fact not refactor and maybe relied on somebody else to do it. Long story short, this piece of code has been copy and pasted relentlessly. So it will probably take you about an hour to make the change in all places. And sure, you could do that or be the one who finally cleans up. You decide to clean up, but then you realize not everyone has been so meticulous when making changes in the past. So you have to deal with some inconsistencies that went unnoticed. But at the end of the day, you've consolidated the code and made the change in one place only. The only downside, it took you 3 hours instead of 1. Of course, it would have been better if somebody in the past had done what you just did, but I say it was probably still worth it. Is this always the case? No. Let's say you have the same situation but in a project that's already on life support because it's soon to be replaced by a new system. In this case, the extra 2 hours are better spent on the new system, right? Maybe the change is in a very tangled part of the code base. It's not even hard to make once you've read the code over and over again. And you know that because you've been there before. In fact, everyone on your team knows it. And every time someone makes a change, they say, gosh, we really have to clean up that mess. We should set some time aside to do that. And some teams actually do, but to many this is just a myth. But you just read the code, you made the change, and you know how it works. Sacrifice yourself for the team. Go the extra mile, even if the effort to refactor is disproportionate to the effort to make the change. You'll make everyone suffer less, but if you can't do that, try to make at least a few improvements, and hopefully the next person will pick up the ball and continue what you've started. I guess what it all boils down to is don't think about whether you should refactor. Make it your default and only skip it if there's a good reason. And just in case you didn't notice, the reason for refactoring taking longer in my examples is because apparently some people, and this could include yourself, didn't do it. It's very common to say, let's just finish it now and clean up later, but later never comes. Again, some people actually do that, but I think it's the exception, not the rule. And some people don't refactor at all, or at least not regularly, given the many no's in this thread. They didn't explain why, so I can only guess what the reasons might be. Some might think they need permission to do it. I say the advice from this 25-year-old book is still solid. Don't ask, just do it. Chances are no one's gonna even notice, but if they do, it'll probably be because things are running more smoothly. Others might not do it because, I've got features to deliver and deadlines to meet. I don't have time for that. And I get it, I've been there. When stress surges, the first things to go overboard are refactoring, writing tests, and even properly testing things manually. Just get it out of the door and deal with the aftermath later, right? I've learned the hard way that skipping those essentials doesn't always save you time. When you're stressed, you're more likely to make mistakes, and mistakes are harder to catch as the code gets messier, which makes you even more stressed, and in the end you end up running in circles and everything takes longer. Maybe you're different and you can pull it off. In this case, good for you. But please make it clear to your boss or client that you're taking shortcuts. I can't stress it enough. Don't leave them with the impression they're getting the same quality in less time for putting you under pressure. This is not the case and they need to know that. Also remind them that postpone doesn't mean abandoned and you'll have to clean up later when things settle down. Don't think, what's the use? They might say yes, but we all know they'll never give me time to do that. It's just pointless. And while that might be true, I strongly believe we developers need to work on this collectively. We need to establish a solid baseline of practices that are non-negotiable. We are professionals and we must act like professionals and not budge so easily. We have to be more persistent, and the more people do that, the easier it'll get. I still think it's best to refactor right away, but if you can't do that for whatever reason, you should at least be able to do it later. Let's take never off the table. See you next time.